Hey, Shalom Akim. First foremost, give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rachakuras. The bonners under the Elders Apostle Great Millstone, the Elders Great Millstone, and of course, peace and blessings under the hopeful elect, the sincere servants of Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, serving with truth and sincerity. Yes, I'm the brother Chayabah from ZMS Plain Tables Camp. Come back with another lesson to his spirit. This lesson be based off of Joel chapter 3 and 9. We know the nations aren't merely discussing the possibility of war, but they're setting in place these weapons industries and the systems needed to prepare for war. So that's what's described in Joel chapter 3 and 9. To read it, it says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men." So it says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles." Continuing on, it says, "Prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up." So it says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles." The Gentiles referring unto the other nations, other than the nation of Israel. When I say the nation of Israel, I'm referring unto the real biblical Israelites. Pursuant to the curses, Deuteronomy chapter 28, 14 on down, it goes into the curses that the Israelites will go through, which it all pertains onto the so-called blacks, Native Americans, Latinos. Also, our people have been scattered, pursuant to Deuteronomy 28:64, going to how there's going to be a scattering of our people among these other nations. So we're going to have our people coming with the appearance of these other nations. But the point is that this is speaking about the other nations other than the nation of Israel, the real biblical Israelites. So you can go into Psalm chapter 83. So the scriptures go into Edom, so-called white men. It goes into Ishmael, so-called Arabians, Moab, so-called Chinese, Ammon, so-called Japanese, Ham, so-called Africans, so on and so forth. Those are the Gentile nations. So it says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men." So war is being prepared. So militarily, these nations are preparing for war. Also, we see it through industrial and political level. But the point is that war is being prepared. And we see that. You can just go all throughout the news. We see how they're preparing for war on all fronts. It says, "Wake up the mighty men." Yeah, so these different military powers and fighting forces are being activated. It says, "Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up." So the preparation is going to develop towards confrontation. The confront is going to occur. The main part of it is going to occur within the Middle East, which is going to be the War of Armageddon, where all these nations meet up with one another in that region to fight. So you're going to have many troops being sent to that region to fight. So that's where they're going to gather up. So let's go ahead and get an article real quick. It says NATO, so this is from nationalnews.com. It says NATO summit in Ankara launches multiple missile production programs across Europe. So to read a little bit of it, it says the NATO summit held in Ankara on July 11, 2026, resulted in a series of agreements to produce and deploy American-made missiles in Europe, according to officials and announcements made during the meeting. Keyword American-made. The programs include the acquisition and stationing of Tomahawk cruise missiles in Germany, a potential license for Ukraine to manufacture Patriot interceptors, and the establishment of European production lines for ATACMS ballistic missiles and Ukrainian-designed cruise drones. So it says officials describe the agreements as closing strategic gaps in building European defense industrial capacity. It says a summit hosted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and attended by U.S. President Donald Trump marked a significant expansion of NATO's missile infrastructure on the continent. So Donald Trump did this. And what happened to these so-called peace deals and negotiations being made between these other nations? Meanwhile, you still have agreements occurring on missile production, showing you that it's not going to slow down. So this is an agreement and plans of missile production increasing, going into war, being prepared. So to state it, as the scriptures go into, even though they say peace, then it's done destruction. There's no peace unto the wicked. So even though these peace deals are being made, missile production will still occur. War preparation will still occur and continue until it happens, which we know is right around the corner. Let's go ahead and get Luke chapter 21 and 24 or 25. It says, and there should be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress in nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. So what we just read in Joel describes what the nations are doing. Whether it's being reported or it's not being reported, the point is that they are still preparing for war, because the scripture said that they would. So Luke describes the condition, how these things will develop while these events intensify. It says, verse 26, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So the key point, it says, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. So because of the distress of nations with perplexity, being confused, having all these meetings about what they're going to do all around the world, you see chaos on all levels, on a political level, social level, so on and so forth. The point is that there will be distress. Getting that word for distress within the Greek word is sunoke. It says a holding together, a narrowing. It says straits, anguish. When you get that word for straits in the dictionary, it says a condition of difficulty, trouble, or severe need, especially one involving emotional, financial, or practical hardship. In this sense, the word refers to being in a tight or troubled situation from which escape is not easy. So on emotional, financial, practical, in all fronts, this is the state of the world right now. It says in anguish. Anguish meaning it's a severe mental or emotional pain, a tense suffering caused by grief, fear, loss, or deep distress. And it's only going to increase. Scriptures mention how in 2 Ezra chapter 16, anguish will be sent by the Lord. So ultimately, it's all of Yahweh Bashim Yashai. These things aren't coming about by no reason. No, it's prophecy. So if it's prophecy and it's the word of the Lord, then we know it's from Yahweh Bashim Yashai himself. And everything is of the Lord. Because the Lord has already spoken it. Yeah, so in perplexity, confusion, doubt, not having resources, not knowing which way to turn. So that's the state that the world is going to be in. But continuing on. Verse 27, we just read 26. By reading 27, it says, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So as these nations are in distress, and it's only going to continue to increase, the straits and the anguish is going to continue to increase. These are the beginning of sorrows. As the scriptures say, it's only going to get worse. It says, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Yeah, so unexpectedly, while all these things are happening, Yahushua is going to come back when they least expect him to come back. It says, verse 28, and when these things begin to come to pass, and look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And who's Yahushua directing this to? Is he directing it onto the world? No. He's directing it onto the disciples. He wasn't speaking onto the rest of the world. He was speaking onto his disciples, the ones who served him, his servants. And as we know, Yahushua calls his servants friends. So prophetically, this applies unto the hopeful elect. So read again. It says, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So the Lord tells us to be in a hopeful spirit, looking up, lifting up our heads. It says in Strong's definition, figuratively, be elated. So what does elated mean? Extremely happy, uplifted, or filled with high spirits. Feeling a strong sense of joy, triumph, or encouragement. So that's the spirit Yahushua tells us to be, an extremely happy, uplifted, or filled with high spirits, feeling a strong sense of joy, triumph, or encouragement. So the state of the world, or how the world is feeling, they're in a state of distress and perplexity and anguish. They don't know what to do. But Yahushua told us to look up and lift up our heads, for our redemption draweth nigh. Meaning, and that strong definition we just brought out, figuratively meaning be elated. So we're supposed to be rejoicing that Yahushua's return is very, very near. And at that point, Yahushua will be making his return. But right now, even we rejoice, knowing that these things are prophesied. Greek word for lift up, it says epahero, meaning it says, raise up. It says metaphorically, to be lifted up with pride, to exalt oneself. So we know that this is in a good sense of pride, meaning confidence, to be confident, not what this isn't in a bad sense. No, it's in a good sense. Boasting in Yahushua, knowing that his return is very, very near. That's what we do. Putting our trust and confidence in Yahushua, not in our own selves, which is the bad form of pride. No, the good form of pride is putting our trust in Yahushua and believing on him 100%. That's a good pride that we're supposed to have. So it says, for your redemption draweth nigh. So redemption going into salvation. That's what we're waiting for. So it draws nigh. So the point is that the hopeful elect is supposed to be in a joyous spirit, knowing that these things are coming to pass. And at that point, Yahushua's return is very, very near. So right now, we're in that spirit. Again, rejoicing and lifting up our heads. So to recap, Joel chapter 3:9 gives the command to these other nations, because they're not doing it by their own will. No, they're doing it by the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. They're preparing war. So that article we bring out gives us a direct example in the current events of how these nations are preparing for it, are preparing war. What we just read in Luke chapter 21:25 shows us the accompanying stress or distress and perplexity that these nations will be in. And what to end it off, Yahushua tells us what spirit to be in through all these times. That his return is very, very near. And that how what redemption draweth nigh. So that's what we're waiting for. So I believe that's the point. Lord's Lord, brothers out there edified. Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Kakurash Brakathum. Shalom.